6 months, 64 sprint car races, a lot of wins, a lot more travel, and so much more. I've experienced a lot here in the USA, and in this video, I want to tell you everything I've learned and realized since I've been here. Okay, so I've got a list of notes here, and the first thing I wanted to bring up was safety. It's easy to shit on them, and yes, I don't think their track safety standards are as good, but it's more just a different mindset over here compared to what we have in Australia. So simply, in Australia, we either meet a standard of track safety or we don't race, okay? That's just how it is. In the USA, it seems you might see a dodgy fence or no fence at all, a blunt opening, sharp edges on a guardrail, and instead of like, we can't go racing at all, it's more like, damn, that's not ideal. Try to avoid that tonight. So it's just a different way that they look at it over here. One thing that I did realize very early on is that almost none of the tracks have a secondary fence. And that even goes for, say, like the nicest venues like Charlotte that we were at recently. The photographers are literally leaning against the same fence that the cars would hit. Wild to me, but totally normal here. In saying that, the most injuries that we saw all year was at Eldora, and that venue is probably just as safe as far as the facility wise than as any track that we see over here. Just because the track is safe doesn't mean bad things can't happen. All of that kind of leads into point number 2, and that is that some of what we're seeing is a result of the Outlaws versus High Limit battle. Now, let's lay it out here. To have a national series, you need to travel around, and to have top teams join your series, this schedule needs to make sense. So while a lot of the schedule revolves around the major events, you need to fill that travel in with other events along the way. What we're seeing with having 2 national series now is that a lot of the tracks are siding with one series or the other. So for example, Knoxville and Huset's not taking high limit shows in favor of the Outlaws. Or on the other hand, we have places like Skagit and Port Royal siding with high limit and locking out the Outlaws. So that really means that both series will go to tracks that aren't necessarily ideal for big events or great racing or quality safety. Another side note of what I've realized while being here is that we can travel a few hours up the road, and the USA has such a big population that you can pretty much turn up anywhere and get a decent crowd no matter where you go, even if it is a bit of a shithole. I know I said shithole, but some venues aren't great at all. Doesn't mean that it's not good racing, but some of them aren't so nice. Point number 3, there is a lot of travel. So I went to 64 races since I've been here in 6 months. That doesn't include a bunch of rainouts where we actually went to the track but got rained out. There were also a couple of practice nights that we went to in there. But in all of that, there is a lot that you don't see, and that is the hotels, the late night or early morning drives, the sponsor or partner visits, at least for Rico anyway. So just to take you through what I've experienced in those 6 months, here's the amount of travel that I'm talking about. And remember, we flew to California after the Knoxville Nationals, and we also took another trip to California, but that was in between the racing. So all of this, basically, we drove to, okay? I met the team in Texas. We went through to Kansas, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, over to New York, back to Pennsylvania. We went to Michigan, all through Wisconsin, to Nebraska, Iowa. We went to South Dakota, then through Missouri. We went to Kentucky for our only trip of the year, up to Pennsylvania, back to Iowa for the Knoxville Nationals, all the way over to California. Remember, I flew there, but a lot of the teams and drivers are still driving. We went up through the West Coast, so to Oregon, Washington, and then here's the crazy one. We went from Washington back to our home base here in Indiana, and then to Pennsylvania, back to Ohio, and then the next week to New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And then to finish out the year, we went from Indy to Kansas to Missouri, then to Texas, back here to Indy, and then just last week we finished with a trip to North Carolina at Charlotte there. It was an incredible experience, and I'm not sure how many miles that is, but it was a lot. Point number 4, which is just a quick one, and that is that despite the battle for series supremacy, a lot of the staff actually get along. A lot of them used to work together, and I know a lot of them, including on the Outlaws side, don't agree with the Outlaws' stance on not acknowledging High Limit yet, anyway. And obviously, some don't appreciate that in a way, High Limit has compromise what the Outlaws is. But the staff seem to coexist, which is both good and awkward at the same time. And like this photo here, as High Limit series director Mike Hess told me in a video a while back, they talk about possible rule changes with the Outlaws and other major tracks like Knoxville. So while it is a bit awkward, they do coexist. Number 5, the Outlaws versus the Posse thing feels like it's very much been taken over as now the Outlaws versus High Limit, which is kind of understandable, right? Depending on who you are and where you're watching from, I'd love you to comment down below, because maybe if you live in PA, you might disagree, but I'd say it's a better rivalry now. It's two national series coming head to head at a few select events. For example, we know Rico won at Plymouth in Wisconsin. That was a big deal. And then you had, say, Buddy Kofoid winning at Eagle in Nebraska, or Carson Macedo showing up to Lernerville in Pennsylvania and winning there. So I think it creates this awesome element that we didn't used to have in the sport. And I'd say as long as both series exist, that rivalry is only going to grow. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but please do comment down below what you think. Number 6, now this point might ruffle some feathers, so just hear me out here, but I'm going to say it. The Outlaws is still the premier series for now. After traveling with Rico for the past 6 months on the High Limit Tour, I was seriously impressed with what, in just their second year, what the High Limit Racing Series has become. But when you look at all of the major factors like the crowd size, the event history, entries, the venue, the payouts, I would say that the few major events within the sport are still World of Outlaw events. And that is the only thing that I see tips it really in favor of the Outlaws. When I look at the major events and the ones that really give me a special feel and vibe, the ones that brought the best of the best together, and the ones with the biggest crowds, they are all Outlaw shows. You've got Eldora's Kings Royal, you've got Knoxville with their Nationals, and just recently with the World Finals at Charlotte, I was really surprised how big of a crowd that is. What is the biggest High Limit event? Well, I'd probably have to say the Skagit Nationals maybe gets the biggest crowd. Maybe the best and biggest event might be Chico for the Gold Cup, or I know there was a few races there at Port Royal that got really, really good crowds. And obviously High Limits event at Eldora, the Joker's Jackpot, which was shown live on Fox Sports, was a huge event, and that could be a sign of things to come for the series. Now, here is a point that I have to make, and that is that High Limit definitely has all of the momentum at this point in time. While some may think that the Outlaw roster is heavier at the pointy end, I think there is no point even debating that the High Limit racing teams have become true national teams, and it's a much more compelling series to watch. What will the sport look like in 2 to 3 years' time? Well, that's going to be interesting. And you know what? I'm going to add in an extra point here, and that is that number 7, the tracks really own the sport. And now, what do I actually mean by that? And that is that Eldora owns the Kings Royal and Knoxville owns the Knoxville Nationals. The sport and its history and its notoriety revolves around these very few what they call crown jewel events. I think that this is a really important point here, because depending on how these two national series evolve over the next couple of years, we could see a serious shift there. I think a couple of years ago, before High Limit started, no one would have thought that Casey Kane Racing and Tony Stewart Racing, the two powerhouse teams of sprint car racing over the last 20 plus years, would shift to High Limit so soon. Will that shift plateau, or will it continue? Who knows? So I guess the point I'm really trying to make is that I see the tracks as a very big deciding factor in how the sport evolves and what direction it goes over the next couple of years. Number 8, the benefits of modern media. Now, one thing I have definitely seen over here is that the tracks and the series and the drivers, especially, and the teams that are embracing modern media are growing the sport and they are growing within the sport. And then there's the people who aren't using modern media and they're not growing at all. I do see a similar thing happening back home, maybe just at a smaller scale and a slower rate, but the benefits probably aren't being seen right now. And I think in the long term, you'll see all of that pay off. I'm going to try be a little humble here, but Rico has the biggest following of any driver in sprint car racing and by a long way. And I've loved being tasked with trying to grow that even further. And the same goes for when Sprint Car Hub is in Australia as well. I've always just wanted sprint car racing to grow and reach its full potential. Sprint Car Hub has the largest following of anything in Australian sprint car racing, and I've loved working with tracks like Toowoomba, Perth, and Darwin to grow their presence and their audience around their major events. So if you like this sort of content, obviously the American sprint car racing season has wrapped up for 2025. And that's why now I'm so excited that the attention of all racing fans is going to shift to what's happening back home in Australia. And with that, you should probably click subscribe down below because Sprint Car Hub will be your home, your destination that you can follow for all of the major events, just like the Perth Motorplex's High Limit International coming up at the end of December. You've obviously got January's Grand Annual Sprint Car Classic at Premier Speedway that will be at the Australian Sprint Car title, and a bunch of other events that I'm sure you guys are all going to want to pay attention to. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone.